Hi. Hi, my name is Karen Quintana. I'm here today to talk to you about Signorelli's chapters 15 through 18. We've got quite a bit to cover, so let's just settle in and get started. In chapter 15, it starts talking about the story brief. The overview, let's cover that first. Chapter 15 will discuss the story brief and its components. In 16, we'll look at the I am statements and why they're important. Chapter 17 has some good I am examples for us to go by, and then Chapter 18 will discuss the UVP and why it's necessary. Now, we'll talk about Chapter 15. Next. In Chapter 15, we do discuss the story brief. It provides a summary of strategic thought and sets up the expectations for the brand's messaging. It defines the elements of the brand story by defining both the brand and the prospect's inner and outer layers. The other difference is in how the questions are asked and answered. There are 6 questions that lead up to the definition of the unique value proposition, or the UVP we'll talk about a little bit later, and the central idea behind the brand story. It requires I am statements of the brand and the prospect, both of which are written in the first person. And in short, the story brief simply asks you to state what you've learned and the decisions that you've already made about everything except the UVP. Next. First step is the backstory. What is the brand's current situation? How did it get there? How do we know about the prospect today? What do we know about the prospect today? What are the brand's goals for the future? Include all the background information that you can on the competition and trends that are going on in that category. You may wish to refer back to Chapter 6 in our textbook where we originally learned about story branding. That might help you out. Next. Secondly, we're going to define the brand's inner layer. What value or important belief does the brand champion? And if you used an archetypal analysis, state the archetypal definition of the brand. Signorelli reminds us that in Chapter 10, when we learned about this with Deanna, we need to think of the person as a brand, or the brand as a person, and as a prototype that can be copied or patterned. Most importantly, you want to provide your rationale. Next. The third step is to define the brand's outer layer. What is the brand's outer layer of unique advantages and benefits? Explain how this outer layer is congruent with the brand's inner layer. How is the inner layer supported by the product's advantages and benefits? And then lastly, write the I am statement for the brand. Next. Step 4 talks about what are the most important obstacles we're going to have to overcome. Well, what communication obstacles stand in our way of the brand achieving a level 4 relationship with the prospect? It gives you 4 things that we want to rate on a scale of 1 to 5. The first one being product function awareness. To what extent does the prospect know the product's functions? Secondly, the product benefit comprehension. What are the product's unique functional benefits, and does the prospect understand them? Thirdly, the brand association. What does the prospect associate with the brand? How strong is that association? And then lastly, the brand affiliation. To what extent is the prospect's relationship to the brand? Next. The 5th thing we want to look at in those steps is to define the prospect's outer layer. Provide all the relevant and measurable attributes like the demographics, the psychographics, the geographics. In other words, you want to look at age range, sex, income, family, size, geography, those type things. And define the most important functional needs, making certain that it's consistent with the brand's outer layer. Next. Define the prospect's inner layer. Define the prospect's most important functional need, or what is their most important value and belief that they want to get across. Make certain this need is consistent with that brand's inner layer. Remember in Chapter 16, we're going to be talking about the in-depth examples of the story brief and for both Bleach Bright and Maverick trucks. Next. So in Chapter 16, the I am statements allow us to try on the individual psyches of the brand's story, the characters, to see how they fit. Signorelli gives us the example of Dustin Hoffman and how he was immersed in studying savants before his role in Rain Man. And it forces us to identify with characters in ways that simple explanations simply cannot. For a brand, writing an I am statement simply helps us to relate to the brand as a person The I am statement organizes your story's characters, and they're used to describe both what they do and why they do it. Next. So how do you write an I am story? Statement. Signorelli says, let the I am statement take you where you need to go. May the force be with you. Start the words I am and just let it go. But remember, from the beginning of the book, we were introduced to the example of an I am statement with that last national bank back in chapter 1. You may want to go back over and look at that again if that helps. Remember, the goal of your brand story is to build a connection, a long-lasting relationship with that prospect. Next. So writing the prospect and brand I am statements, well, Signorelli suggests that the two have to complement each other. He recommends that we start with both the outer layers of both, and it would help us to organize our data that we've gathered. He refers to this as bragging first, selling as we've known it in the business world or in marketing, but he says brag away and then edit later. Next. So some guidelines to help you organize the data in the prospect's outer layer. Well, again, start with the demographics. Explain the problem and why a solution is needed. What does accomplishing the character's goals look like? What is your character's experience with the product? Are they aware of the competition's brands? And do they have any thoughts that are erroneous? Are there any feelings that your character has about your product? Make sure you discuss those. Next. The guidelines to help organize that data in the brand's outer layer would be to define what the product is talking about, features that are consistent with the prospect's needs. Provide the rational support for why this product can solve the problem. Explain what success looks like for the prospect from the brand's point of view. Talk about the advantages that you have overcome with alternatives, the competitive alternatives. Use current customer experiences, maybe a ranking in a magazine or personal testimonies or celebrities that have endorsed your product, and provide information that counters misconceptions. Next. Writing the prospect and brand I am statements. Well, next we want to look at the inner layer. Signorelli recommends that we start with that brand first and then alternate between the brand and the prospect's inner layers. Writing is harder as the concepts are a little more abstract when you talk about feelings and beliefs and values. The primary idea is to become the prospect and the brand. Pretend that you're talking instead of writing. Next. So some guidelines to help describe the prospect's inner layer. Talk about the values you explain to subscribe to that are consistent with the brand's beliefs about what is important. Explain why they're important. Make sure that you've written as your prospect's outer layer serves as proof of what you really stand for. The problem that you're trying to solve should be reflected in the inner layer. And the most important ingredient is that of empathy. Immerse yourself in what it must be like to be that person. Think about Dustin Hoffman and the Rain Man character. Don't just say something, but explain why. Draw on metaphors or comparisons to real things to make the intangible more concrete. Next. And then a few guidelines to help describe the brand's inner layer. Well, take from the archetype description of your brand all information that explains what it is that you and your brand stand for and believe in. Go back to that chapter 10 and use that wording verbatim if you have to. Signorelli says he often also just searches the internet for keywords and looks for ideas and even quotes that might help him to start getting his train of thought going. Next. Chapter 17, he gives us some great I am examples of both the Bleach Bright brand and the Maverick Trucking. And he says that the more you practice, the better you become at I am statements. So in looking at his Bleach Bright examples, he gives the prospect I am example of, when I reach into my closet, I need to know that my clothes are as perfect as the day I bought them. No tears, no stains, no fading. I don't have time to fix my clothes. I don't have time to redo the laundry. I don't have time to waste, period. Isn't that how often we feel? Whether you're a working mom or whether you're a single student, often we feel like we don't have enough time. And if a brand can reach out and touch us, sometimes that's just where we'll go. The brand I am statement responds to that with, for my customers, good enough is never great, and they want great. for them a lot depends on confidence. The way a person looks won't just instill confidence, but looking the part goes a long ways towards living the part and feeling the part. Next, let's look at the Maverick brand. The Maverick example, again, is in trucking, if you read through your chapters. And the example of the prospect is, when I became an operator of my own truck, it was like getting a new lease on life. No more bad routes. I could choose where I wanted to go and when. The days of towing the corporate line were gone, and hopefully forever. But trucking is hard, and when you own a truck, it's a hard life. The bills often get very heavy. And so the brand of Maverick, which is owned by National Trucks, responds to that with, there's no hiding the fact that I'm made by National Trucks, the truck that is preferred by long-haul transportation companies. These days, with gas prices going up and more owner-operators going down, I don't make apologies for being who I am. In fact, I'm doing more to keep independent truckers from losing their independence than any truck on the road, because they're willing to be that truck so that the independent truckers no longer have to own their own trucks. Next. Chapter 18 covers the UVP, or the unique value proposition. It's the point, the punchline, the premise of the brand story, all rolled up into a simple, provocative statement. The unique belief that we want both employees and prospects to associate with the brand and beyond its just functional purpose. It explains the why beyond the brand, beyond just the profit. The example, it's important to do things the hard way so that no stone is left unturned, is covered in the book. If you look at the next page, so go ahead and flip your screen, you'll notice it's the company Intuit's homepage. The UVP is right there on the front page next to the logo, and it simply says, simplify the business of life, because that's what they do. If you look at the tabs across the top, you can see companies that they have. They have Quicken, QuickBooks, TurboTax, among others, that really do simplify lives. And there it is, in black and white, just simple. Next. So USP versus UVP. What do all those initials really mean? Well, the USP is from a marketing and business background. It talks about the unique selling position. It must proposition the customer, must be unique, offering something the competition cannot or does not offer. It must be strong. It has to move the masses. It has to motivate you. While the UVP, the unique value proposition, extols beliefs, not benefits of the brand. Why the brand does what it does, what's behind the profit motive, and what's beyond it. Why does the company exist? And it does not depend on the seller's assertions. Next. The uniqueness problem. Well, often competitors are propelled by the same belief. For an example, insurance companies. They all want to believe that, or make you believe that you should be safe and everyone should be protected. However, which one do you choose? So when you're faced with a dilemma, often the best story wins. If you watch all the car insurance commercials on television, whether it's Allstate or Liberty Mutual or Nationwide, they all have great stories. And the story that you can relate to the best is usually the company you're going to choose. How well the value proposition resonates with your audience should often be the ultimate test, but it's often measured by how well the audience identifies with that brand. Is it for people like them, and why? Maybe their scenario has happened to you, and that's why you choose the brand. Next. Theme lines versus plot lines. Theme lines are like taglines. They simply imply the brand's belief that the way a story's theme expresses the story's significance. It enlists subscription to specific human values that are important. It's intended as belief statements that resonate with people who share beliefs. An example might be Apple. At the end of some of their commercials, they have a phrase that says, think different. They want Apple users to think differently. They want them to think that thinking different is good and above and beyond. It increases their resonance with their prospect. Plot lines, on the other hand, express what the brand wants the prospect to believe. They state what the brand is and does from the brand's point of view. They're like brag lines. An example might be like a rock from Chevy Truck. If you think back on those commercials, you see trucks going four-wheeling and up on rocky climbs and doing all kinds of things that your normal car couldn't do. And so it does increase a bit of resistance. That's what plot lines are decided and designated to do. Next. So what are some thought triggers for UVPs? They're often usually lessons or morals that we learned as children. There's some examples on page 192 and 193 in your textbook. Beauty is only skin deep, birds of a feather flock together, slow but steady wins the race. We think of the turtle and the hare. Another great source that Signorelli gives us is brainyquote.com. He suggests looking up quotes that might help trigger a thought about how you could get started writing your UVP. So in review today, we've talked about the story brief, which defines the elements of the brand's story. You have to answer the 6 questions before you can define the UVP. We talked about I am statements and providing a valuable immersion experience as you think and feel like the character. Don't forget the prospect and the brand statements should also complement each other. We talked about the UVP, and it sums up the human role associated with the brand, such as love or freedom or even creativity. And the object of that is to powerfully communicate a shared belief in a way that is charged with emotion. The driving force behind story branding is that as resonance increases, resistance decreases. And lastly, the challenge I have for you today is Signorelli tells us that I am statements are critical components of the story brief, that we get better with practice. So you need to write an I am statement for yourself, for your personal brand. Besides helping you to define your personal brand, it may help you to understand the process a little bit more. So choose an audience that you want to impress with who you are and what you stand for. And go, write that I am statement. My references I used today are Signorelli's text as well as the Intuit.com website. I hope you have a great week and thanks for listening.